"Make it fast, chief. I won't beg," he said, but the Apache chief saw something else in him. The sun beat down harshly on the dry desert ground, casting long shadows across the barren land. Jonah Reed, a rancher from the far side of the frontier, squinted against the heat, his boots kicking up small clouds of dust with every step. He had come a long way from his ranch, where cattle had mysteriously vanished, taken by a group of raiders who left nothing behind but destruction and confusion. Jonah wasn't one to sit back and wait for answers. He knew what had to be done, and today he would face the Apache chief Tahoka to demand the truth. Jonah had heard the stories of the Apache chief, how he was a leader like no other, wise and fierce, a man who commanded respect with a mere glance. But Jonah wasn't afraid. He had spent his whole life fighting for what was his, and this time he wasn't going to let the desert or its people stand in his way. With his rifle slung over his shoulder, Jonah arrived at the edge of the Apache camp. The heat was unbearable, but he walked on with determination, the clink of his spurs the only sound in the still air. As he approached the camp, he noticed the Apache warriors watching him from a distance, their eyes sharp, calculating. They weren't surprised to see him, but they were wary. Jonah came to a stop before a large fire where Tahoka stood, his back to the flames. The chief was a tall man, his posture strong and unyielding, his features carved like stone. His dark eyes studied Jonah as if he were no more than a passing breeze. There was no welcoming smile, no attempt at conversation, only a silent challenge. Jonah stood his ground, refusing to flinch. "Make it fast, chief," Jonah said, his voice steady. "I won't beg." Tahoka did not speak at once. Instead, he moved closer, his presence like a weight on Jonah's chest. The heat of the day seemed to fade as the chief's gaze locked onto Jonah's. "You think I do not understand your pain?" Tahoka's voice was deep, his words carrying the weight of years lived under the desert sun. "You think I do not know what it is to lose? To feel the anger boil in your blood?" Jonah's eyes narrowed, his grip tightening on the rifle in his hands. "I'm not here for your sympathy, chief. I want my cattle back. I want answers." Tahoka watched him, his expression unreadable. "You have come to the wrong place, Jonah Reed, but you have come with the heart of a warrior." "I didn't come here to fight for your approval, chief. I came to get what's mine." "Is that what you seek?" Tahoka's voice was low, almost mocking. "What would you do with your cattle, Jonah Reed, if you cannot lead them, if you do not understand their hearts, their fears?" Jonah felt a flicker of frustration stir within him, but he swallowed it down. "I can lead. I've been doing it my whole life." The chief nodded, as if considering Jonah's words. "Yes, you can lead, but you lead alone, Jonah Reed. That is your curse." Jonah bristled at the insult, but Tahoka continued before he could respond. "You have lived a life of solitude, a life of fighting, of taking, of surviving, but you have not lived a life of belonging, of understanding others, of walking with others as one." Jonah's jaw clenched, but he held his tongue. Tahoka's words cut deeper than he was willing to admit, and the desert wind, now a soft whisper, carried the weight of those words into the silence between them. "Your cattle are gone, but what you seek is not just cattle, Jonah Reed. You seek something deeper," Tahoka said, his voice steady and calm. Jonah didn't speak, but his mind raced. What did the chief mean? He had come here for justice, for revenge, not for some lesson about his life. But the chief was right. He had always been alone. He had never truly belonged to anything, not even his own land. "You are a man with fire, Jonah Reed," Tahoka continued. "But fire without purpose burns everything it touches. I see it in you, a warrior's spirit, wild and untamed." Jonah didn't know how to respond. He had heard stories of Apache warriors, but he had never imagined himself as one of them. Yet here he was, face to face with the chief, listening to words that spoke of something more than the fight he had come for. "I'm not here to join your tribe," Jonah finally said, his voice low but firm. "I just want my cattle back." Tahoka's eyes softened, just for a moment, before his face returned to its usual unreadable mask. "You will have them, Jonah Reed, but it is not through force that you will find them. It is through understanding." Jonah shook his head. "I don't need your understanding. I need my cattle." The chief smiled slightly, a knowing smile. "Then you will find them, but not as you think." Jonah's frustration flared again, but something in the chief's gaze made him pause. Tahoka was not mocking him, not ridiculing him. The chief's words, though cryptic, held a deeper meaning that Jonah couldn't yet grasp. "Go," Tahoka said, stepping back. Return to your ranch, Jonah Reed. But remember this, the answers you seek are not found in the things you take. They are found in the things you learn. Jonah stood there for a moment, the chief's words lingering in the air. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. His boots kicked up more dust as he left the Apache camp behind, but something had shifted inside him. The fire within him still burned, but now there was the faintest inkling of something else, something he had never considered. He didn't know what Tahoka had meant by his words, but one thing was certain, his life would never be the same. The journey had only just begun. Jonah Reed stood at the edge of the Apache camp, the weight of the chief's words heavy on his mind. He had expected to leave with answers, with the cattle that had been stolen from him, but instead he was walking away with something more, something he wasn't sure he understood. He had agreed to follow Tahoka's suggestion, but the road ahead was uncertain. Jonah was a man who knew how to survive, but the idea of walking with others, learning their ways, felt foreign to him. He had always been alone. His journey had begun, but it was far from over. The chief's offer to join the Apache had been unexpected, and though Jonah didn't fully understand it, he had agreed. The Apache didn't expect him to stay forever. Tahoka had simply asked Jonah to spend time with the tribe, to learn their ways, to see what it was that he had been missing in his life. Jonah had spent years chasing after things, land, cattle, respect, but the chief's words had made him question whether those things were truly enough. Was he simply a man of pride and stubbornness, or could he become something more, something better? The next morning, Tahoka led Jonah through the Apache camp, showing them how the tribe lived. The children played near the fire, their laughter echoing through the camp, while the women worked together, weaving baskets and preparing food. The warriors practiced their skills with spears and bows, their movements smooth and precise. Jonah couldn't help but notice the quiet strength that ran through the tribe. They moved with purpose, with a sense of unity that Jonah had never known. Tahoka guided Jonah to the center of the camp, where an older Apache woman was preparing a pot of stew over an open fire. She greeted them with a warm smile, her weathered face lined with years of experience. "This is Nijoni," Tahoka said. "She will teach you the ways of the land." He had always been a rancher, working the land, raising cattle. The idea of learning from someone like Nijoni was humbling, but he wasn't sure what it could teach him. Nijoni's hands moved deftly as she stirred the stew, adding spices and herbs with careful precision. "The land speaks to us," she said, her voice soft yet steady. "It tells us what it needs, what it craves. You must listen to it." Jonah watched her closely, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Listen to the land?" he repeated. "I'm used to working the land, not listening to it. There is more to the land than what you see. The earth holds knowledge, and those who understand it know how to live in harmony with it." Jonah was silent for a moment, considering her words. He had always worked the land with a sense of ownership, a sense of control. The idea that he should listen to it, respect it, was something he had never considered. As the day wore on, Jonah worked alongside Nijoni, learning how to gather herbs and prepare food in a way that honored the earth. He found himself surprised by the peace that came with it. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he was part of something greater than himself. The land wasn't just a resource to be exploited, it was a living, breathing entity that needed to be cared for. That evening, after the sun had set and the stars blanketed the sky, Jonah sat by the fire with the other members of the tribe. The flames flickered in the darkness, casting dancing shadows on their faces. Tahoka sat across from him, his eyes glowing with the firelight. "You have learned much today," Tahoka said, his voice deep and calm. Jonah nodded slowly. "I didn't expect to learn anything like this," he admitted. "I always thought I knew what it meant to work the land. But this is different." Tahoka smiled, his expression thoughtful. "You have begun to understand the first lesson, that true strength comes not from taking, but from giving, from living in balance with the world around you." Jonah felt a flicker of something deep inside him, a shift he couldn't quite explain. He had always thought strength was about survival, about taking what was his by force if necessary. But now, sitting here with the Apache, he was beginning to see that there was another way, one that required patience, understanding, and respect. The night passed quietly, and the next day Jonah began to help with the tribe's hunting. He followed Tahoka and several of the warriors as they ventured into the mountains, learning how to track animals, how to move silently through the terrain, and how to strike with precision. Jonah had always been a good shot, but hunting in the Apache way was different. It wasn't about just taking down the prey, it was about understanding the rhythm of the hunt, the ebb and flow of nature. That afternoon, as they stalked a herd of deer, Jonah felt the weight of the land pressing in on him. He could hear the rustle of the wind through the trees, the soft thud of the deer's hooves against the earth, the quiet murmur of the river in the distance. It was as if the land was alive with energy and Jonah was learning to move with it, not against it. After a successful hunt, the tribe gathered together to celebrate. The meat was shared, the fire crackled, and the people sang songs of their ancestors. Jonah sat with them, watching as the Apache danced, their bodies moving with a grace and rhythm he had never seen before. They weren't just celebrating the hunt, they were celebrating life, the connection between the land and the people. As the night wore on, Jonah couldn't help but feel a sense of belonging that he had never known before. He had always felt like an outsider, even on his own land, but here, among the Apache, he felt like he was part of something bigger than himself. The fire in his chest that had always burned with anger and pride began to cool, replaced by a quiet understanding. Tahoka sat beside him, his eyes thoughtful as he watched the celebration unfold. "You are beginning to understand," the chief said quietly. "This is the way of the Apache. We live as one with the land, with the animals, with each other. We do not take without giving. We do not fight without purpose." Jonah looked at the chief, his expression solemn. "I still don't know if I belong here," he admitted. "I'm not like you." Tahoka's gaze softened. "You are more like us than you realize, Jonah Reed. It is not the land you come from that matters. It is the heart that you carry." Jonah sat quietly, the firelight flickering in his eyes. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. He was no longer the man who had ridden into the Apache camp. The journey had only just begun. The days passed slowly, but with each one, Jonah Reed felt himself change in ways he hadn't expected. The Apache way of life, with its deep connection to the land and its people, was beginning to take root in his heart. He was no longer the man who had ridden into the camp desperate for answers. Now he was a man who was learning to listen, to the earth, to the people, and to himself. Tahoka had become more than just a leader to Jonah. He had become a mentor. The chief's wisdom and patience were like a steady stream, quietly guiding Jonah toward a deeper understanding of the world. But Jonah's pride, the same pride that had kept him alone for so long, was still a heavy weight in his chest. He struggled to let go of his old ways, his need for control, his belief that he had to fight for everything. One morning, as the sun rose over the desert, Tahoka called Jonah to the center of the camp. The chief's face was serious, his eyes narrowing as he looked at Jonah. "Today you will face a test," Tahoka said. "It will be a test of loyalty. You must prove to yourself what you are willing to give, not just take." Jonah felt a spark of fear in his chest. "A test?" he repeated, unsure of what the chief meant. Tahoka nodded. "A test of your heart, Jonah Reed. You will go into the mountains and retrieve something important to the tribe. An artifact stolen by a rogue faction of our people. They have taken it and hidden it in the deepest part of the mountains. You must bring it back, but it will not be easy." Jonah's heart raced. He had heard the stories of the rogue faction, a group of Apache who had turned away from the tribe's ways and embraced a life of violence and greed. He had never imagined that he would be sent to deal with them, but now the chief was asking him to do just that. "Why me?" Jonah asked, his voice low. "Why not one of your warriors?" Tahoka's gaze softened. "You are more than just a man of pride, Jonah Reed. You are learning. You are beginning to understand what it means to be part of something greater than yourself. This is your chance to prove that you can lead, that you can protect the tribe." Jonah stood silently for a moment, his mind racing. He had been given a chance to prove himself, but was he ready for it? Was he ready to face the rogue faction, knowing that they would not hesitate to kill him if he failed? "I will do it," Jonah said at last, his voice steady. "I'll bring it back." Tahoka nodded. "Go with my blessing, Jonah Reed. But remember this. True strength is not about taking what you want. It is about protecting what is yours and honoring the bonds that tie you to others." Jonah mounted his horse, his thoughts a whirlwind of uncertainty. As he rode into the mountains, the wind at his back, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the task ahead. He had always been a man who worked alone, who relied on his own strength and willpower. But now he was being asked to fight for something greater than himself, to fight for the Apache people, to protect what they had worked for. The mountains loomed ahead, jagged peaks rising into the sky like dark sentinels. Jonah rode through narrow passes and steep cliffs, the rocky terrain making every step a challenge. He knew that the rogue faction was somewhere ahead, hiding in the shadows of the mountains, but he wasn't sure where to begin his search. As the hours passed, Jonah's thoughts turned inward. He thought about the chief's words, about loyalty, about giving instead of taking. For the first time, he wondered if he had been living his life the wrong way, Had he been so focused on survival, on fighting for what was his, that he had lost sight of what really mattered? His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps. Jonah immediately pulled his horse to a stop, his hand going to the rifle at his side. He dismounted quietly, moving with the stealth of the Apache warriors he had come to respect. The sound of footsteps grew louder, and soon Jonah saw a figure moving through the trees. It was one of the rogue faction, an Apache warrior, but with no respect for the tribe's ways. His face was twisted with anger, his eyes hard as stone. The rogue warrior saw Jonah and stopped in his tracks. There was a moment of silence between them, a moment where Jonah could feel the weight of the decision he had to make. He could draw his rifle and fight, or he could do something else, something that would test his loyalty to the Apache people. "Are you here to take what is ours?" the rogue warrior asked, his voice rough, filled with contempt. Jonah's grip on the rifle tightened, but instead of drawing it, he took a step forward, his eyes steady. "I'm here to take back what you've stolen. You don't belong here anymore. You've turned your back on the tribe, on everything we stand for." "Duh!" the rogue warrior sneered. "And what do you stand for, Jonah Reed?" "You're no Apache. You're just a man with a gun and a prideful heart." Jonah felt the fire stir inside him, the same fire that had always driven him to fight. But now, something was different. He wasn't fighting for his own pride, for his own survival. He was fighting for something bigger, something that required him to be more than just a man of strength. It required him to be a man of honor. "I'm fighting for the people who have shown me what it means to belong," Jonah said, his voice calm but firm. "I'm fighting for the Apache, and I will not let you tear that apart." The rogue warrior's expression darkened, and in that moment, Jonah knew the battle was inevitable. But instead of charging in with his rifle, he moved with purpose, his body a reflection of everything he had learned in the past weeks. He stepped forward with the confidence of a warrior, not with violence, but with the intention to protect. The rogue warrior lunged, but Jonah's training took over. He moved with speed and precision, disarming the rogue warrior before he could fire a shot. The rogue fell to the ground, defeated, but Jonah didn't kill him. He didn't need to. He knew that the true victory was in preserving life, not taking it. Jonah stood over the rogue warrior, his chest heaving with the rush of the fight. "You've lost," he said, his voice low. "But the Apache still have a chance to stand strong." The rogue warrior glared at him, but Jonah didn't wait for a response. He turned and rode deeper into the mountains, determined to find what had been stolen and return it to the tribe. Jonah Reed rode deeper into the mountains, the landscape growing harsher with every mile. The air was thin, and the silence of the high country weighed heavily on him. His heart beat steadily in his chest, but his mind raced. He had faced the rogue warrior and proven that he had learned something of the Apache way, but the real test was still ahead. He had to find the artifact, the one that had been stolen by the rogue faction, and return it to the tribe. But that was not the only thing that haunted him now. Jonah had learned many things during his time with the Apache, and the lessons had begun to sink into his bones. Yet, he still wasn't sure if he could truly belong with them. Tahoka had given him the task to prove himself, but Jonah wasn't sure what it meant to be truly loyal, to be part of something greater than himself. He had spent his life fighting to survive, to take what he thought he deserved. Now he was asked to give, to understand, to belong, but it felt foreign to him. Could he really let go of his old ways, his old pride, and embrace the Apache way of life? As he rode, Jonah thought about the people he had met. The women who taught him how to listen to the land, the warriors who moved with such grace, and Tahoka, the chief who had shown him the strength of unity. The Apache way was not about individual glory, it was about community, about the strength of the tribe and the balance between taking and giving. It was about honor, something Jonah had never really understood until now. The mountains stretched before him, the jagged peaks like ancient sentinels watching over the land. Jonah knew the rogue faction was close. They had been hiding in the shadows of the mountains for too long, and now it was time for him to confront them. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the landscape, Jonah finally saw the cave in the distance. It was nestled in a narrow valley, the entrance hidden behind a thick veil of trees and rocks. He had found it. The rogue faction had been using this place as their hideout, and the stolen artifact was likely inside. Jonah dismounted from his horse, his boots crunching against the dry earth as he approached the cave. His hand went to the knife at his side, the weight of it a reminder of the journey he had undertaken. He was no longer the man who had ridden into the Apache camp demanding answers. He was something more now, something that had yet to fully reveal itself. The cave was dark. the air cool and damp. Jonah stepped inside cautiously, his eyes adjusting to the low light. He could hear the faint sounds of movement ahead, and he knew the rogue faction was close. As he crept deeper into the cave, he found the stolen artifact, a small, intricately carved stone, glowing faintly with a soft inner light. It was a symbol of the Apache tribe's history, a reminder of their ancestors, their struggles and their triumphs. Jonah knew that returning it was not just about the artifact itself, but about restoring balance to the tribe. Suddenly a voice echoed through the cave. "You found it," the voice said, rough and mocking. Jonah froze, his hand instinctively reaching for his rifle. From the shadows, a figure stepped forward. It was the rogue leader, the man who had turned away from the Apache way. His eyes glinted with malice, his hand resting on the hilt of a dagger. "You think you can take it back?" the rogue leader sneered. "This artifact is mine now. It's not yours to return." Jonah's heart raced, but his voice remained steady. "It was never yours to take. It belongs to the Apache people." The rogue leader laughed, the sound echoing off the cave walls. "The Apache people? You think they'll welcome you back, Jonah Reed? You're no Apache. You're just a man with a rifle. A man who thinks he can take what he wants." Jonah's grip tightened on the rifle, but instead of raising it, he took a step forward, his eyes locking with the rogue leader's. "I'm not here to take anything. I'm here to restore what you've stolen. The Apache way is not about taking, it's about giving, protecting what's ours. You've forgotten that." The rogue leader's eyes narrowed, and he took a step closer, his hand tightening on the dagger. "You talk like you know the Apache way, but you don't. You're just like the rest of them. You're weak." Jonah felt the fire stir inside him, the same fire that had always driven him to fight. But now, instead of anger, it was replaced by something else, something deeper. It was understanding. Jonah knew that fighting with anger would only make things worse. He had learned that from Toka and the Apache people. The real strength came from controlling that anger, from understanding the balance between force and restraint. "I'm not weak," Jonah said quietly, his voice calm but firm. "I've learned more than you think. I've learned that true strength comes from protecting what matters, not from tearing it down." The rogue leader's face twisted with fury, but before he could lunge at Jonah, the sound of footsteps echoed in the cave. More members of the rogue faction appeared from the shadows, their faces hard and filled with defiance. They were ready to fight, but Jonah didn't draw his rifle. Instead, he stood tall, facing them with the calm strength he had gained over the past weeks. "You've lost," Jonah said, his voice steady. "The Apache will always stand strong. You can't break us, no matter how hard you try." The rogue leader and his followers hesitated, their eyes flicking between Jonah and the glowing artifact. Jonah could see the doubt in their eyes, the fear that perhaps they had chosen the wrong path. But it wasn't Jonah's place to judge them. He had been given the chance to restore what had been lost, to bring balance back to the tribe, and that was what mattered. Without another word, Jonah turned and walked toward the artifact, his steps steady and sure. He didn't need to fight them. The true victory was in the return of the artifact, in the restoration of what the rogue faction had taken. He picked up the stone, feeling the weight of it in his hand, and without looking back, he began to walk out of the cave. As he emerged into the fading light of the evening, Jonah knew that he had made the right choice. He had not fought with anger or violence. He had fought with understanding, with loyalty to the Apache way, and that, more than anything, had proven that he was no longer the man who had ridden into the camp with nothing but pride and anger in his heart. Jonah Reed had found something greater than himself, something that would stay with him for the rest of his life. The choice he had made had not just restored the artifact to the Apache people, it had restored him, and that was the greatest victory of all.